Hi everybody, thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn. I run the services at MedCommsNetworking.com and the associated websites. So information, resources, activities and so on for people who work in and around the global community, MedComms community, by which I mean people who work in and around medical communications, medical education, medical publishing and the associated businesses. And also we produce lots of information for people who want to get a job within our business, maybe as a medical writer or an account manager or so on. So if you look specifically at first medcommsjob.com, you'll find lots of useful information there. We're doing a lot of webinars at the moment. I have been for some time and recording them and collecting the videos. You'll find at NetworkPharma TV, we've now got comfortably more than 400 videos, many of which are based on webinars like this. So there's a lot of content there to go and have a look at if you've not had a look already. Today, absolutely delighted that we're going to be talking about SEO. It's a slightly different take on content and distributing content and accessing content. We've got the guys from Performance IO here. So I'm not going to steal their thunder. I'm going to hand over to Tom to introduce himself and the team and to talk us through SEO in medical writing. Over to you, Tom.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Peter. And yes, thank you to everyone who's been able to be on the line today, and also in advance of anyone taking the time to watch the recording as well. So hopefully this will be a very useful session on SEO and really why it's important in the medcoms industry and why you need to be thinking about it if you're writing any kind of content for the web. Okay, great. So I'll start with just giving a brief kind of overview of what we're going to be covering today. So as I said, we're covering why medcoms must utilize SEO. So we're going to give you a little bit of background on who we are, and then going into kind of what is SEO, and then why it's important to you. So on the line today, we have myself. So I'm Tom. I'm the medical copy lead here at Performance IO. I've been here for about 4 or 5 months now, but I have been working in medcoms as a medical writer for a few years, and over that time very much went into or was interested in this niche of the kind of digital side of the content, the kind of data and analytics that underpins content and the content you choose to create. So then being able to go into Performance IO, where that is the core of how we operate, is really exciting, and having the opportunity to use my learnings from the wider medcoms industry and help build out our content team. So very nice to meet you all. And I'll hand you over to Isla to introduce herself.
Hello, nice to meet you all as well. So I'm Isla MacAskill and I'm the SEO Content Coordinator at Performance IO. Started off with a science degree a long time ago and a science communication master's. And then I ended up getting a job as a copywriter. So as SEO is quite important now, and I also have a passion for science, being at Performance IO seemed like a nice way to combine those interests. And I've been at Performance IO for about 9 months, but feels like a long or short time depending who you ask. And I'll hand over to Siobhan.
Thank you so much, Isla. So just to echo Peter and Tom's sentiment at the beginning, thank you so much to everyone that's joined us today, giving time out of your day to join us and virtually, and also those that are watching on the webinar when it airs. So yeah, my name is Siobhan Robertson. So I'm one of the directors and the global head of SEO at Performance IO. I have done SEO for the best part of a decade. I've worked at various different digital agencies, between big media groups like Havas Media and then small independents that are quite bespoke in the work that they do on the technical and data side. I joined the business about 2.5 years ago to help build and craft a really strong SEO team to try and complement some of our really strong healthcare and pharma expertise to make sure that we are delivering essentially quite a big mission statement, which is to really disrupt healthcare and pharma in driving SEO results for some of our really big clients. So we work with, I'd say, 7 of the top 10 in healthcare and pharma, and the last year has been nothing short of a blur, really. We've had a lot of big new business wins, but I think at the heart of it all, and what we're keen to cover today is the content side of things, which Tom and Isla will take you through. So if you just take me through to the next slide, I'll just cover a little bit more around who we are as an agency. So we started around 4 years ago, and we were set up by our lovely chief founder, Matt Lowe. So he's been in digital for the best part of about 20 years, and he had a real core frustration that, his words, not mine, but that there's not a great deal of measurement when it comes to content production and websites being created within healthcare and pharma. So I can tell you, so many times we will be brought in and we will be given a website to look at, and the content looks beautiful. It's live, it's in Google, but no one is actually finding that website and no one is actually coming through to visit it. So a huge part of what we do is actually providing data and actually showcasing how we can actually utilize some of that existing content with the kind of expertise, the tools that we have, marrying it up more to search behavior to actually make sure that people are going into Google and they're actually finding that content. So really joining the dots. So as I mentioned on my introduction, so we're a mixture of deep category experts. So we've got a really strong understanding of SEO in my team, but also heavily supported by really strong expertise in our content team under Tom. But our accounts team are predominantly all ex-pharma and healthcare. So we've got obviously Isla's got a strong science background. We've got people that have, we've got a qualified vet running our animal health healthcare division. So it's really marrying up the SEO expertise and the healthcare expertise to make us unique. And we really are the only pure play SEO and performance agency, at least that we're aware of in healthcare and pharma. In order to try and keep our smarts and keep ourselves sharp, because healthcare and pharma websites do tend to be slightly less advanced when it comes to some of the SEO practices that are in place. We're really making waves, and you'd be surprised how many conversations we're having with big pharmaceutical companies where they're not even sure what SEO is, and it's 2022. So it's very, very different to my experience when I've worked with brands like Arcadia Group, British Airways, Verizon, O2, where they're doing SEO every single day, and it's a huge part of their digital strategy. So 80% of our portfolio is broadly speaking pharma and healthcare, but we do have 20% of more consumer-based clients, just to make sure that my team are challenged, they're kept sharp. We use those understandings to kind of apply into healthcare and pharma. Experienced team, I think I've covered. It's intrinsically linked to us being deep category experts, but I can't stress enough that really we're big on the data and results. So it's literally in our name as an agency, performance.io. So everything that we do is backed up by data. So a lot of the time we will be brought in to actually showcase that a piece of content doesn't perform. No one's finding it, and we'll provide recommendations in order to make sure that people can find it. And then finally, so another huge, I guess, USP to a degree is that, as I said, we're a pure play SEO agency, so we don't do any paid media, we don't do any social. So it just allows us to really kind of look at things without a biased view on it. So we're seeing more and more RFPs come through where people are actually wanting their SEO and their paid agency separate because they're getting a more accurate view on performance. So again, just worth flagging that we are pure play. SEO is all we do. We don't do any paid media. If you just take me through to the next slide. So what do we do? So Isla's going to take us through a whole section on what is SEO, which could be a cool question for quite a few of us, but really just breaking it down in layman's terms. So as you can see, if you follow my island on the left, we've got a lovely picture of Google search there. I'm sure everyone here, if not using Google, you're using Safari or using Yahoo, but Google is our core focus, and that's because 70% or 80%, I think it is, of the market share of search engines is people using Google. But realistically, we're making sure that we work with brands so that when they type in a search query like neurodermatitis, that our clients' websites will come up on the first page of Google, allowing them to actually get people clicking through and actually finding that content, finding the useful information that's been produced in the first place, and getting them through to the website. So in terms of an approach, we always start with user intent. It's absolutely critical, particularly in healthcare and pharma, where some of the topics might be slightly more nebulous and slightly more detailed. But we really need to understand how people are actually searching for a drug or a brand online. We can drill down to the best of our abilities between different profiles, so HCP, patients, etc. We then conduct a organic landscape analysis, so a competitor tool, which allows us to actually understand in that space around potentially neurodermatitis, who are your top competitors, what are they doing, what kind of content have they written, what sort of elements are they doing on their website that means that Google is rewarding them enough for them to be coming up on the top first page of Google. Then once we've got all of this data, so at this point we have a really good understanding of how users search for a particular topic or a brand that's directly applicable to one of our clients. We've got an understanding of the actual space itself, so the competitors, what's working. We then use all of that insight to actually generate a strategy. So what do we need to do in order to actually perform and make sure that we're on that first page of Google? So a lot of it will be, obviously every strategy that we do is bespoke, but broadly speaking, some of the elements that would sit out of that would be SEO content production, which Tom will talk about in much more detail later on in this session, technical changes, working with PR and comms teams to make sure that any coverage is actually going back to the website to try and improve the authority. So it's loads of different elements that we look at, but they're kind of three core areas that we focus on to try and drive results, which leads me nicely on to the final point. So once we've actually started implementing our strategies, it's all around performance and reporting. So we provide dashboards that actually allow us in really, really granular detail to, on a monthly basis, report on the impact of changes being made to the website, changes being made to content, to see, are we actually bringing more users to the website and hopefully generating more leads for our clients. So this is a lovely time for me to hand over to the wonderful Isla to actually go into more detail on what SEO is.
Yeah, thank you, Siobhan. So I think a lot of people might have been sat there and thinking, what does SEO actually stand for? I know when I go to the pub and people ask what I do, it takes about 20 minutes to explain what the actual acronym means. But in this interest, it's quite easy. So search engine optimization is what we know as SEO. And this is a set of processes that help get a web page to be displayed highly in organic rankings of a search engine results page. So when we put a query into Google, we're then met with another page which has a list of rankings and other features. We don't need to underestimate how the internet is now the go-to place to find information and products. So being visible on this search engine results page is essential for any communicator for any type of business. There's an interesting thing of what Siobhan was saying earlier about being at the top of the search engine results page is something that's obviously very wanted, but at the top of a search engine results page you will get paid ads. So these links will have ad next to them and they're displayed just under the search bar. So again, why are we bothering focusing purely on the organic aspects rather than the paid results? Well, I know I'll never click on a paid ad. It's quite rare that people will click on paid ads. As Siobhan was saying before, website traffic generally comes from organic listings rather than the paid media. And as a business, if you want to keep at the top of those paid ads, you're going to have to keep paying for it. Just because you pay for something doesn't necessarily mean it's better. So in SEO, we're creating content that's going to be visible for a lot longer and more a cost-effective method. And ultimately, there is a lot of benefits for SEO in comparison to paid media, but for you guys that are creating content or communication, you're actually improving the quality of your site and your content by being SEO minded. It's also an opportunity to gather qualified traffic and other aspects of your audience. So it's fair enough explaining what we do and why we don't do paid media, but how do we do it? So if you click onto the next slide, and the one after, please. Well, as Siobhan was saying earlier, we start with queries. We start with what we call keywords. And this is what our audience are searching for and the language they're using to find it. You know, a communicator's job is never done if they're not actually providing something that their audience wants. So when we find information on keywords and keywords and our users, this can inform our content creation better. It means that we're actually creating content that our target audience will find useful and ultimately that can be recognized by Google that it's useful to that user. So for instance, if we're looking at those keywords down here on this slide, these might give us an indication of how we're going to form our content and what each brand should provide. But it's not just also understanding what our users are searching for in the language they're using. It's also about how Google is interpreting our page too. So part of what we do is having to unpick the mind of the great search engine. So in simple terms, if we think of Google as an index with a library of billions and billions of pages, it's working to find the most relevant information for each query. So once it's found relevant pages, it will decide which one is the most relevant and which is the most useful to the user. And it's this ranking in pages from top to bottom that is this relevancy scale. And part of what we want to do is to make sure that our page is in the competition. And to do this, we have to adapt our page content, and there are numerous technical aspects to communicate to both Google and ultimately the user that our page is worth being on that search engine results page. But some of you might already know about SEO, or you might know a bit of SEO, and it's often thought that actually we just have to place a few keywords and put them in certain frequencies in our content and that'll be all right, we'll rank. You're actually not, you're wrong. Like, because we wouldn't be sat here if that was it, if it was just that easy. There are 200 signals to judge which, that Google uses to judge which page is the best one to serve in those search results. And when we consider all these things together, we can come up with a strategy that makes sure that we're giving the best chance at being at the top. But in saying that, as you can say from this, see from this pie chart, it doesn't mean that content is not relevant anymore. Actually, content is still king. So when we think about making something that is SEO worthy, we always have to start with the content. And for you guys listening, when you're creating content, not making it with SEO in mind means you're not going to be visible to your audience, and you're not providing them with information that they actually want. Especially in something like MedComms, the expectation and standard for content should be very, very high. And Google has this expectation as well. So in order for our content to be visible, we need to make sure we're fulfilling the standards that Google has set for medical content. Quite recently, there was a helpful content update that Google released to its algorithm, and this was all about weeding out poor quality content in search results. There's a famous medic update, I think in 2018, that had a similar aspect where it was making sure that anything that was displayed to a user had gone through a very strict verification process by Google's algorithm. But for you guys, it's not just working one way of having to satisfy Google, it actually satisfies your abilities as a content writer. If you're being SEO minded, it means that your content will always be of high quality and relevant to the person you're trying to communicate with. So it's not just satisfying Google anymore, it's also satisfying user and making a better writer of yourselves. But more of why you should care about that, I'll hand over to Tom.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Isla. So yeah, hopefully, particularly for those of you who may not have even kind of heard of SEO before this, or really not know the ins and outs of how any of it works, hopefully that's given you a bit more insight into that. And you're probably now thinking, right, now how is any of this actually relevant to my kind of day-to-day working life within MedComms? Why do I need to think about this beyond this webinar today? So I guess before kind of going into a bit of the detail of that, I just wanted to kind of go into a bit more about me and my background. And I guess that, you know, as Siobhan touched on, part of, you know, why kind of we're able to kind of carve out this niche is that kind of lack of, you know, insights and data that you sometimes get with the content that you're creating. And I've definitely had it in, you know, my experience of creating content at other agencies, is that you know, put a piece of content together, and then as soon as it's kind of handed over to the client or gone live, then that's it, and that's the end of, that's what you see. You then don't get any insights into how your audience is interacting with that content, what parts of it they're engaging with, whether it's actually reaching the right people. And I think, you know, for people, for, you know, particularly writers who put so much effort into their research, into putting quality content together, and obviously, you know, the priority for that and kind of what drives you to do that is thinking about the, you know, whether it's a doctor or a patient or a member of the public at the end who gets to see that content and the impact it might have on them. So actually, you know, following this insights-driven approach where you start by thinking about, right, what's my audience actually searching for? And then you make sure to put content together that's actually going to answer that question. And then being able to see the data that comes back, see people interacting, and then finding that content useful has been a really, really rewarding process, and kind of what I have been looking for quite a while. So I've been very much enjoying following that through Performance IO. But so why, going into a bit more of the data behind this, so your audience for the kind of content that we produce throughout MedComms uses search engines a lot. So this is data from a few years ago, but you'll see that there are over 1 billion health-related searches in Google every day. So that's, you know, a huge amount of, whether it's members of the public just looking for general disease information, whether it's doctors looking for specific information on the drugs that they're prescribing their patients, whether it's patients wanting to learn more about how their drugs work, how they should be using them, side effects, things like that. Google is, you know, the first port of call for people to get answers to those queries, as it is, you know, for us when we have a question about anything. So that number isn't really surprising, but obviously that's quite generic. So if we dig into a bit of an example here, so if you look at oncology, a study from a couple of years ago showed that there were almost 52,000 oncology treatment related searches per month in the UK. So if you think about it, if you're, you know, creating content for whether it's patients undergoing oncology treatment, whether it's HCPs, to kind of encourage them obviously to learn more about and use your clients' oncology treatments, that is a huge audience that you could be capturing for that content. And if you're not thinking about SEO and how your content ranks, then you're losing out. And from a kind of content quality and from a kind of why we do what we do perspective, that means that there are tens of thousands of patients, doctors looking for this kind of information online. And, you know, we have a responsibility to make sure that the content that they see that comes up on that first page of Google is accurate content that comes from a reputable source. It's actually going to help them answer that query. So if you dig into the data, if you see what people are searching for, then that really helps you figure out how to kind of put your content together and what to produce. So if you see here, within that kind of 52,000 per month search terms, obviously a lot of that will be dominated by kind of patient, what you consider patient related terms. So searching for, you know, what is chemotherapy, what is immunotherapy, more general topics. So, you know, that'll give you an insight into the kind of information they're looking for, and that will make up a bulk of the search results. And you know that your kind of typical HCPs, particularly oncologists, won't be searching for kind of such generic terms, but you also find these kind of pockets of opportunity where you see what is kind of a complex medical term that actually only a doctor who's kind of prescribing, working with those kind of treatments will be searching for. So if you see that you have a lot of traffic around terms like, you know, antibody drug conjugates, immuno-oncology drugs, things like that, then you give you a really good idea of what your kind of target HCP audience is actually searching for, and tailor your content, because I can't tell you the amount of times that we'll have, you know, a client strategy or their kind of key claims, things like that, and then we'll search for keywords that rank for that and you'll get nothing. So what they think they should be communicating around is not reflected in what people are actually searching for. So definitely an interesting conversation that follows that. And then if we just kind of hone in on HCPs a little bit more, you might wonder, oh, actually, I don't think the HCPs that I work with, or the healthcare professionals, use search engines. That's almost definitely not the case. So as you can see here, you might think, oh, it's probably only GPs who are searching because they work with so many patients with so many different conditions. But this research shows that across so many different disciplines, you have experts from all these areas who are using search engines up to or more than 10 times a day to answer kind of queries that they have, and whether that's checking on the side effects of a drug, checking on who it can be prescribed to, things like that. Google is just the easiest way to access this information instead of them having to trawl through all of their various resources that they have stuffed in a drawer somewhere. And you can see on the right-hand side that you have a large majority of people from anything from, you know, cardiology, neurology, rheumatology, 70–80% use these search engines at least 1 to 3 times a day. So the demand is definitely there, and you want to make sure that the kind of content that they're using, because obviously they're only clicking what's on that first page, is going to be the most useful. And then I guess, so following on from that, it's part of understanding SEO is, as Isla said, understanding what Google is looking for in terms of how it ranks content, and particularly for the kind of content that we produce in the healthcare sector, it's more important than ever, because Google is very, very picky when it comes to ranking this kind of content. So the majority of content that we put together will kind of fall under what Google considers your money, your life. And this is the kind of content where, if it's inaccurate, if it's misleading, it can have, you know, a major impact on people's lives, their livelihoods. So to ensure that only the best quality content actually comes up, Google kind of holds these type of pages to the highest level of what it calls EAT. So this is expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. So Google, this is basically how Google judges that the content on a web page is actually from a reputable source, it's accurate, and it's talking about the right topic. So it will look for kind of a specific content creator who is an expert in that field. So having kind of dedicated author pages and bios and things like that are really useful. You know, it'll look for the kind of authority of the brand itself, or the company that's producing that kind of content, to make sure that it's not just you know, a random news site putting clickbait articles about COVID or something like that, and the kind of trustworthiness too. So the kind of content that we're producing is the kind of content that Google is watching like a hawk to make sure that it's actually accurate and reliable. And if you're not creating your pages in the right way to really showcase this and make sure that Google can see these factors, then it won't be ranking, because it's so careful with what it shows. And just to kind of wrap this up, because I know that you can't talk about anything in MedComms without a case study slide, I thought we'd give a bit of data on just an example of a project that we did a while back that really highlights the kind of change in traffic and the change in data you can get with this kind of work. So here we were brought on to kind of relaunch this disease state awareness site around men's HIV, which just wasn't getting the kind of traffic that the client was expecting. So as Siobhan said, we did the landscape analysis into what kind of competitors for target keywords, what kind of content they were producing, what kind of content was ranking well, looked at the technical foundations of the site to make sure that there was nothing that Google will kind of see as oh, this site isn't put well together, or can't index the site properly, so it wouldn't rank well. And obviously kind of looked at those content gaps, what people were searching for, to put a couple of pieces of content together that were then launched on that site. And just take a little bit of time, because you know, Google has to then trawl the new content, index it, and so there's a bit of a delay, but this is getting shorter and shorter as these kind of software is getting better and better. But in the first kind of 12 to 18 months of this content going live, we saw huge increase in the kind of overall organic sessions for that website, people visiting through Google, and the number of visitors to that site. So, you know, we have 450% increase in organic traffic, almost 600% in the number of users. Having that kind of, being able to come in and offer a client that kind of improvement and engagement with their site is amazing. And actually, just, you know, we can't hide behind anything. We show the data when a project starts, and we show the data when a project ends, and which, by optimizing for SEO, always shows an improvement. Something like this, you won't always get quite these high levels, but this does show the kind of impact that it can have, particularly if at the start, the kind of lesser clients thinking about SEO before we come in, the more of a huge impact we can have. So yeah, this is just one of countless examples we could provide, but always good to show a bit of data of how things can improve. And then just a kind of final wrap-up statement, really, in case this hasn't quite sunk in yet, definitely the best place to bury a body would be the second page of Google results. Thank you very much. And I'll hand you back to Peter to kind of field some questions. Hopefully we've got some interesting conversations to be had around that.
Great, thanks, Tom. If we can lose the slides, that's great. Thank you very much. So yes, members of the audience, and we've got quite a few of you online, so do please use the two chat boxes. You've got a Q&A button and a chat button at the bottom of your screen. Use those boxes to send in your questions, comments, and observations, and we'll weave that into the conversation for the next 10 minutes or so. A couple of things I just wanted to it's picking up on one of the comments I think that's come in. Let's just pursue this one a little bit. I think there's a few rabbit holes we could go down, and we don't want to go down too many rabbit holes. I get that. But you very much talk about Google, and people talk about Google and search interchangeably and so on. You did make the point, I think, Siobhan, 80% of search results probably on Google, more on mobile, but it does beg the question that, or leave the fact that there's not 20% out there. Do you, I suppose, what am I trying to say? So does a client ever say to you, I get what you're saying, Google's the most important, but I want to cover everything? And if they do, how far can you go with that? And how differently do you have to address the different search engines and so on if you go that far? Or do people tend to just go, oh, look, Google's the most important, let's not worry about it, let's be a bit pragmatic? I just wonder whether you could talk around that for a moment.
Yeah, no, of course, Peter, it's a really good question. So we do have a global reach, so we do work with a lot of clients that are based all over the globe, but I would suggest we will have conversations about them. We do have basic experience with Yandex, Baidu, so some of the bigger search engines. Interestingly enough, though, even in Russia, Google's market share as a search engine has actually, it changes quite regularly, actually taking over Yandex. So Google's by far the most advanced. So my experience with Yandex, the one that they use in Russia, is that it's more heavily on, you can buy links. So it's not as advanced as Google. So I think Google's probably the most difficult one to optimize for, and there's definitely learnings on that. But any search engine, obviously China is slightly more challenging, but WeChat's huge over there and tends to be a big focus. We don't do a lot of activity in China, I'll be honest. Google is, like I said, the biggest search engine in loads of different markets that we work with. So Japan, for example, is still very Google heavy. We have, to answer, there was 2 points to your question, I think. So do we get asked by clients to optimize outside of Google? Are they interested? Yes, but it doesn't tend to be a core focus. So Bing sometimes, but really it's just showing them. We obviously have access in Google Analytics. So give or take, that could be slightly skeptical, but with different browsers that are used. So we can kind of see the data that's available. But I would say really a lot of the work we do is Google focused, and that goes across all different regions, because outside of China, it's still very much the big one.
Okay. I mean, it makes sense to me. Just let's anonymous just ping the message. How do you access the terms that are actually being searched for? And one of the things, again, I'm going to say, I'm going to shut up and let you answer the questions. But one of the things that I think about SEO and worries me slightly is, what you're talking about is a very complicated picture. Lots of people, individuals, search in individual ways. There's only the 20 results or something on Google. How do you optimize for all of that? You can't optimize for all that. So presumably what you're doing is looking for key terms, key expressions, and so on, and optimizing for those, and then you have to sort of manage expectations a little bit, I guess. But where are you going? Can you give us a little bit of a sense of how you actually determine what those keywords and expressions are? Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Again, happy to take that question, but I don't want to hog the Q&A, guys.
No, go for it.
Fine. Okay.
It looks like you go for it, yeah.
I can jump in on, so I'll leave you for this one.
You're absolutely fine. So we, like any other SEO agency out there, will use our main source from Google AdWords. So that's the most accurate tool to pull search volume data across any different market. A lot of third-party tools will use Google AdWords as their primary source of data anyway. In terms of how do we try and differentiate, so there will be core, it's using logic, to be honest. There will be obviously some core search terms that are just clearly going to be a healthcare professional because of the way the lexicon use the semantics. There is a slight bit more of wizard pokery for looking at, and we only get very, very small sample of data for this, but looking at the type of query that has driven someone to the homepage, and then looking at the self-certify in the UK market, of course, to see if they've gone, I'm a healthcare professional, or I'm a patient, and being able to track that back. But I would suggest it's a question we get asked a lot. There's no hard and fast way to know if someone is typing and they're a healthcare professional or a patient. Anyone that's telling you otherwise, I would love to speak to them, because from my opinion, Google deliberately tries to anonymize that data for obvious reasons.
Exactly, and there was a question that came in early on about how you deal with that. You know, if patients are looking for content or healthcare professionals are looking for content, that is a very different approach, isn't it? Tom, say a few words on that one, for instance, in terms of the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw that query come through from Darren. So I think, as you say, there are these keywords where you obviously want to be targeting HCPs, and HCPs are looking for them, but it might be a term that patients are also searching for. And it's particularly, as you say, if they're the kind of keywords that are kind of ranking with highly authoritative sites like charities and things like that, they will be difficult to kind of target for your site. So they will be those that may have a huge search volume in the thousands or tens of thousands, but the difficulty in terms of, you know, the authority of competing sites and things like that is so high that we wouldn't recommend kind of prioritizing those terms, but looking for these kind of more niche pockets that are more kind of specific to your target audience. So, you know, we get our kind of keyword research outputs and you end up with some terms around, you know, super general side effects like nausea or very general treatment terms that you kind of instantly write off because the difficulty of trying to rank for those is so hard. But finding these little pockets of terms where you kind of know that the majority of that is your target audience, and they're not necessarily terms that have a huge search volume, but the people searching for them are the kind of people that you want to be capturing, that ends up getting more of that kind of quality traffic that you're looking for, as opposed to, as you say, going for these really, really general, really difficult ones, which is more about your site authority and things like that.
I think, again, I think that's a really important point, and you know, from some discussions I've had in the past, I mean, you can get caught in a problem there that the boss wants you to, you know, the boss of the client, or, you know, but, you know, look, we should be in front of everyone searching for nausea or something like that, and you just go, actually, that's pretty much impossible. So, you know, in reality, you know, can we change this conversation a little bit? But, you know, managing expectations and things around this, I think, can be quite, or I'd be interested to be a fly on the wall in some of your conversations, I must admit. There's a few questions that have come in, which I guess opens up a number of areas of discussion, but let's just touch on it. A lot of pharma company medical content is behind, for HCPs, for instance, behind paywalls of some sort, or firewalls or gateways or whatever you want to call them, as opposed to being, I mean, you're really talking about the open net, the open web, aren't you, for Google, in terms of what you're talking about. There's another step, which is how do you get to that hidden content, and how exposed is that content to that search function? I'm using the wrong words, but you know what I'm getting at. So again, I don't know, Isla, do you want to have a bit of a chat about that, and just how you know, what in reality are we looking at? Are we just looking at the stuff that's very public, or are we able to get to stuff that's hidden behind various gateways? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I do think Siobhan's probably the best to answer this.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're absolutely fine. So I can see, there's a couple of questions that have touched on that theme. It's a question that we've been asked, understandably so, with anyone that we've spoken to in EU top 5 over the course of the last 12 months. So we are working with 2 global pharma brands at the moment to help them develop a paywall mechanism where we allow Google to actually access the content behind the login. But the way that the paywall is implemented is that the content is not surfaced. It's just that the page, it's very similar to how the editorial websites have an implementation. So the Telegraph, the New York Times, where it's called a lead-in paywall. So you'll have a piece of teaser content login, but we allow Google to access all of the content behind it, although not surface it publicly. So 2 big clients we're working with. It doesn't work in every market as easy as it's one rule for everyone. So I know Spain has been really difficult, but we are working with Italy and Germany on rolling that out. So it is possible, not without its challenges. It took us 6 months with back and forth conversations with legal to be able to actually justify that it is compliant, what's the risk mitigation plan in order to do so. But we are able, like I said, I'll be completely transparent, we're testing, but we're confident that we can optimize for content that is behind gated sites.
Okay, all right. There's a question here about translation and different languages and so on. Does anybody want to talk a little bit about that, optimizing for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to take that one. So yeah, as you say, that in the question, there is a kind of barrier in that you can't just look at a page from a UK or US perspective and then just translate that into various different languages. So you have to take a region specific approach. So, you know, when you do your keyword research, when you look at your insights, you have to be looking at how people in that specific region are searching. So, you know, slowly building up a bigger and bigger bank of different language experts from an SEO perspective and from a content perspective, to make sure that they can be looking at it from their regional perspective and not just you know, do one catch-all research or one piece of catch-all content. It has to be specific, because you can see such a difference between what people in different regions are searching for. And then there are also more technical elements that you can do to ensure that your content is only going to be ranking for search engines in those specific regions as well. And I know we had a question related to that, which was around the kind of the lowest level kind of technical elements that you need to get right for SEO. So I wonder if Isla, you want to go through that briefly?
I mean, I think you've already just sort of said quite a lot of it, in the sense of when you're thinking about language, you know, Google's getting smarter and smarter, and it's really looking for natural language. So if you're writing for a certain audience in a certain market, you need to use that language. So for instance, in the UK, we'd use colour with a U, whether in America they'd use it without the U. You know, it's those sort of differences that to us might seem minor, but actually they can equate to a huge difference. So in terms of more of the content side, it's looking at how you can make natural language that's comprehensive, you know, on your site. Make sure you don't use any duplicate content. You don't want your user or Google to be confused which page it wants to get the information from. And I think there is always a lot of a push for things like metadata. That's quite a really simple thing to get right. But that's the title that gets displayed on the search results and description underneath it, you know, making sure that is within the character limits and including the kind of search terms that you would want to rank for is really, really important. And that's just sort of a very basic thing you can start with.
So some of what you're touching on there is, I mean, and again, like just real life, and I suppose there's no answer to this, but let's think about the audience we're talking about. You know, people are generating content that is going on somebody else's website or some other system. You know, there's a certain amount of what you're talking about that you can manage, control, influence, direct, because you're developing content, and there's a certain amount which is completely out of your control. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, you know, although SEO is quite data driven and we deal with hard facts, you know, at the end of the day it's also a bit of wizardry. You know, we can never completely guess how something's going to go, and you know how Google's going to interpret our page. We can tip the balance and definitely make sure that we stand with the best chance, but it's never completely certain. I don't know if you'd agree with me, Siobhan.
No, absolutely. I don't think you've summarised it incredibly articulately. It's an algorithm, and Google will never tell. Even the people that work at Google don't know how the algorithm works. So a lot of it is, we definitely try to future-proof testing and learning, finding things where we work with one client. Okay, right, when we work with client two, we know that doesn't work, and sharing that knowledge. But a little bit of it is an educated, data-driven test and learn, I think.
Okay. We should wrap up in a minute. Tom, I was going to finish with you, and I'm going to put you on the spot slightly, I suppose, maybe. You know, you've come up through MedComms, medical writing, and you've ended up in SEO. I just wondered, just as a finish, I think you did touch on this earlier, but just as a finish, you know, how have you found that that move? I mean, I suppose, and you know, are you opening up a career opportunity for people, you know, in medical writing sort of thing? I don't know, just say a little bit about how you found the move and where you're going.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, I think, you know, it was hard kind of coming through this kind of standard medical writing ladder, but wanting to work within a specific niche. Because I kind of discovered very quickly that I had an interest in the more kind of digital type projects, wanting to get involved in the data, that kind of thing. But then when you work for a kind of a larger sort of all service agency, you obviously end up doing the kind of work that the clients need. So you do a bit of everything. So being able to kind of still use that medical writing, content writing, scientific background, work in one specific area, I think is kind of quite rare, in that there aren't a huge amount of opportunities currently to kind of very much specialize what kind of content you want to be writing for. And I know that it doesn't work for everyone, in that some people really want that kind of variety in terms of working across Congress, advisory boards, content, that kind of thing. But what I very much wanted was to focus in on this area. So being able to specifically focus on web content, being able to get into the data, see how it's ranking, all that kind of stuff, I've found really, really interesting, and kind of, I've really enjoyed it, because I've been able to spend 100% of my time working on the type of content that I want, as opposed to the 10 or 15% of time that I could carve out alongside other kind of client demands and deliverables. So it's one of those where if that's the kind of niche that you want to operate in and you want to write in, and you're this kind of person that is interested in the science but the data at the same time, then this is ideal, and a good kind of alternate route going kind of through that medical writing ladder, really.
Okay. And I just think as a general interest item, medical writing is a very broad spectrum of activity, and to be highlighting niche type areas like this, I just think it's interesting. So hopefully some people have got something to think about there. I know there's probably a lot more you could talk about in a lot more detail, and there's probably several people in the audience going, I want to know a bit more detail. The point about these webinars partly is to raise these points for discussion and areas for discussion, and encourage people to talk to each other. So I would absolutely encourage anybody online at the moment or watching the video to reach out to you. I know you're all very happy to hear from people on LinkedIn, but I think we are slightly over time, so I'm going to call a halt there. If you're in the audience, don't all rush away. We've got a few minutes, and there's a couple of things we can pick up in that time. But just for the moment, I'm going to say a huge thank you to you guys. Everyone, just give a little bit of wave, as I say. If you're interested in MedComms, come to medcommsnetworking.com, and wish you all the very best. So take care and say bye bye.
Bye.